Triumph in Tripoli. The rebels have won a major victory by capturing the city through sleeper cells who they infiltrated into the city of Tripoli and through a land and sea invasion. 200 men were landed by sea on the northwestern coast of Tripoli, whilst other Western forces came in from the Western Mountains region into Tripoli. The city has been now completely cut off. It is evident that the looting and that Muammar Gaddafi did during his reign of terror, and his crime family enriched themselves through the trappings inside his compound, which the rebels invaded and retook for Libya. It is estimated that $280 billion have been stolen from Libya by the Muammar Gaddafi crime family, and that this could have given the Libyans a standard of living equal to Switzerland. Libya is an important country, and its chemical and biological weapons program and nuclear weapons program in the past has made it a key country for Western military analysts to look at. Here in Euronews, an article explains this.
Gaddaffi regime hangs by a thread. The United States is becoming increasingly concerned about the fate of Libya's weapons stockpiles. American intelligence fears that Gaddafi may use the weapons in a bloody last stand, but there's also the prospect of dangerous material falling into the hands of Al-Qaeda or other militant groups, even if the rebels consolidate victory. Libya possesses a huge and varied arsenal, including chemical agents and raw nuclear material, as well as some 30,000 shoulder-fired rockets. Weapons demolition teams have already been at work securing arms in rebel-held parts of the country, but their task is far from complete. It's known that stocks of mustard gas and other substances are stored in drums at a site southeast of the capital Tripoli. US intelligence is aware that hundreds of tons of raw uranium yellowcake is housed in a nuclear facility to the east of Tripoli. Libya signed up to the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons in 2010 and began a program of destruction, which continued until the rebel uprising broke out in February. But the OPCW says much of the stock remains intact. It's a weapon that provokes burning blisters and death, and the international community is desperate to keep this material off the black market. As a result, experts have been sent into Libya and neighbouring countries to tighten up border security.
Colonel Gaddafi may have lost control of Tripoli, but he remains at large and apparently determined to fight on. Well, to discuss the highly volatile situation in Libya, we're joined now by Christian Lemire, an analyst with the independent London-based think tank, the International Institute for Strategic Studies. After the euphoria dies down, what's the next move for the rebels and indeed for Colonel Gaddafi? How will this conflict play out as you see it?
Well, it really depends on whether they are able to recapture Gaddafi's sons and Gaddafi himself and bring them into some kind of Libyan judicial regime. If they are unable to do so, it could be that the Gaddafis are able to launch some form of insurgency, but that depends on having both the materiel and the support. It's unclear at the moment if they do.
NATO says there'll be no boots on the ground, but how can the rebels prosecute this next phase of the conflict, tracking down Gaddafi, without NATO's expertise on the ground?
I think NATO is very keen to avoid any kind of military presence on the ground. There are, as the rebels have shown, there are various numbers of personnel that are involved in the rebel movement, and although very poorly trained, it does mean that they should be able to install some form of law and order.
Are Arabic nations like Qatar, which has been involved, are they likely to increase their military involvement,
I think all nations are keen to look for a Libyan solution here, so they'll be loath to deploy any troops themselves. Qatar and the UAE have been involved by providing materiel to the rebels, certainly some logistical support as well. I think if they're able to avoid it in any way, no nation would like to put their troops on the ground. They'll will certainly be support. There is possibility of special forces or other intelligence personnel being on the ground, but those presences will likely be kept to a minimum because of the potential political opprobrium if NATO forces or any other country is found to have a significant presence on the ground.
Well, we have seen a certain amount of disarray among the rebels. Can they succeed if internal tensions come to the surface as the conflict drags on?
The tribal politics in Libya are obviously incredibly complex, and there'll be lots of jockeying for political position in these very uncertain times. But there's also a real groundswell of positive opinion behind the idea of a Libyan solution and a political solution to this current turmoil.
Well, before we get to that stage, there's still speculation that an increasingly desperate Gaddafi could resort to chemical weapons. What's your view on that?
The arsenal would be very rudimentary if indeed it exists. He declared mustard gas stockpiles in 2004 and they were in a deleterious state at that point, so it's questionable whether there'll be any arsenal left whatsoever. There certainly doesn't appear to be any evidence of chemical warheads that have been weaponized and have been put onto Scud missiles. So it's questionable whether he will be able to use any form of chemical weapons.
After the invasion of Iraq, one of the mistakes the US was perceived to have made was not including the Iraqi army in the rebuilding of the country. Could that mistake be repeated in Libya?
I think everyone involved in the Libyan situation at the moment is very aware of the Iraqi example, and particularly debartification and the consequences of debartification, which really fueled the insurgency in the immediate aftermath of the Iraq invasion. There may be some kind of bloodletting, but I think everyone is keen to prevent a dismantling of the state that existed, because they know that the anarchy that may occur could just fuel instability.
Whatever happens in the coming days, stability seems a long way off. Christian Lemire, thank you for joining us and thanks for your insights.